Today I'm going to show you how to write a discuss both views IELTS essay question that will help you to get a high band score in IELTS Writing Task 2. The process I'm going to show you in this video helps my students increase their band scores from band 5 or 6 to band 7 and higher. Here's the finished essay, and I'm going to write this during this video so you can see the process I used. You can see here the clear position statement, the balanced approach, the way each paragraph builds on the previous one, and how they use appropriate linking words and phrases. And there's some precise vocabulary in this essay as well. And here is the task that I'm going to respond to. It's from Cambridge IELTS, Book 19. It's the academic IELTS, and it's test 1 from Book 19. Some people think that competition at work, at school, and in daily life is a good thing. Others believe that we should try to cooperate more rather than competing against each other. Discuss both these views and give your own opinion. Now, many students will immediately start to write their essay, and that is often why they get stuck at band 6 or even lower. If you want to get a high band score, it is absolutely essential that you plan your essay. And that is what we're going to do first of all. We're going to plan an essay using my 4-step planning process. Step 1 is understanding the task. Step 2 is deciding our position. Step 3, we're going to extend our ideas. And step 4, we're going to structure the essay, which is basically all about paragraphing. So let's start by trying to understand the task. We're going to try and analyze the task first of all. So some people think that competition at work. So we have on the one side competition at work, at school, and in daily life. That's a good thing. So some people think competition is a good thing. Others believe that we should try to cooperate more. So we have competition, we have cooperation, two different sides, rather than competing against each other. So this other group, this second group of people, thinks that cooperation is better than competition. And we've got to discuss both of those views and give our own opinion. One thing to notice is that the task mentions work, school, and daily life. So you need to try to mention all these 3 areas in your essay. So now we have an understanding of what our task is. We know what we have to do. Now we're going to move on to step 2 in the planning process, which is to decide your position. Normally in an IELTS essay, your position is simply your answer to the essay question. But when you have to write a discuss both views and give your own opinion essay, it's slightly different because you have effectively 3 different positions to discuss. You've got the first view, which in this particular essay is that competition is a good thing. You have the second view, which is that cooperation is better, with 2 T's. And then you have your own view, your own opinion about this particular topic, which I will reveal later on in the essay. So in effect, in a discuss both views and give your own opinion essay, when we talk about deciding your position, it's actually 3 different positions you have to discuss, which is why they can be quite tricky if you don't approach this essay in the correct way. So step 3 in my planning process is to extend your ideas. So we have the position here that competition is a good thing. But to extend our main idea here, we need to think about the reasons. Why might these people, so some people think this, why might they think this? What are the reasons for their view? Well, I would think that if I had somebody who has this view with me, they might say that competition encourages people to strive for excellence, if I can spell it correctly. So it helps people strive for excellence, to be successful. Then we need to extend this idea a little bit more as well. We need to give an example. When we're talking about examples in IELTS essays, what we're trying to do is to illustrate our ideas, to paint a picture in the IELTS examiner's mind about what this big idea actually means. So you need to get into specific details. So in the workplace, can you think of a situation in the workplace where competition is a good thing because it helps or encourages people to strive for excellence? The first thing that popped into my head was the idea of a sales representative, a sales rep. I think sales representatives are often encouraged to get good results by getting them to compete against each other, maybe awarding prizes for the best sales representative. So this encourages sales reps to be the best or to be better at work. But remember that the task talks about work at school and in daily life. I'm probably not going to cover all three of those things, but another example, maybe in school. So in what situations might competition be a good thing in schools? Well, perhaps it encourages students to be the top of the class. That's the idea that came into my head. When I was a school child many, many years ago, they used to put lists up on the classroom notice board about the exam results, and it would rank all the students in the class from 1 to bottom, from first to last. So you kind of wanted to be near the top. So it may encourage students to be top of the class. So these are two ideas, these are two examples to support this particular idea of striving for excellence. I think this might be enough to explain that first view. You could think of a second reason, but I think that might be enough for this particular essay. So now we need to move on to the second view, that cooperation is better. And again, what are the reasons that they might have this particular view? Why do they think this? Well, I think they think this because cooperation encourages people to share ideas and also work together. So that's my main idea, my main reason. I need to explain that in more detail. I need to try to illustrate this so that the examiner is absolutely clear what I'm talking about. Let's talk about daily life, since that's the third thing in the task, which I need to try and make sure I cover. So in what situations might cooperation be a good thing in daily life? Well, the thing that comes into my head is that if people work together, you can work together to improve your local community. You get groups of people working together to improve their local community. So maybe they will get together and clear up the litter in their local community, or perhaps to volunteer and help other people. So that again illustrates this idea of working together. And an example, I could either talk about education, school, or work. Let's do one for work. So how might cooperation help people achieve things at work? Well, I think if people work together and share ideas, you're more likely to get innovation, so new ideas. And also, if people work together and share ideas, they can solve problems because they have maybe different skills or different perspectives on a particular problem. So that's a good way of solving problems in a company. Maybe they have problems with marketing, and they need to try to make marketing better at their organization. So if they work together, share ideas, share their skills, their perspectives, then they'll be able to solve any problems that they might have. I could even go into more detail, but that's not necessary. This should be enough for this particular essay. Again, I could think of a second reason, but I think that will be enough because I need to now explain my own view on this. Of course, it might be an idea at this point for you to pause the video and try to think of your opinion, and if you want to, put your opinion into the comments below this video. But my view is, well, I think cooperation is great, but not necessarily all the time. So I would say mostly, or perhaps broadly. I broadly feel that cooperation is the best way, or is better than competition. Now, why do I think that? Now, you may have a different view. You might entirely agree with view 1. You might entirely agree with view 2, and that is perfectly fine if you can explain it. And it can be a little bit tricky to explain your views if you fully agree with one of these two views, because you run the risk of repeating these ideas. So if you think that competition is a good thing, you've got to think of another idea, otherwise you're just going to repeat this again. So sometimes a better approach is to have a slightly what I call a nuanced view, to say that, well, yeah, broadly cooperation is best or competition is best, but in certain circumstances, the other one might be okay. So in certain contexts, competition might be better. For example, I think if results or if outcomes can be quantified easily, such as with sales representatives, then it can be better for competition to be used. So if outcomes can be quantified, so in certain contexts, competition might be better, but I think broadly, cooperation might be best. So this is a slightly nuanced approach. Another way of ensuring that you don't repeat the same ideas you've already written down is to point out the weaknesses of the view that you disagree with. Now, I think that competition is broadly better than competition. So, and this explains why competition is a good thing. But why might competition be a bad thing? So what I'm going to do next is to explain why I think competition is a bad thing, or maybe can be limited. So I would say that competition is limited, not necessarily bad, because it can demotivate people. So for example, some of the weaker students in the class, remember I talked about how in my school they used to put all the students ranked in order of achievement in an exam, so from first to last. Well, the students last or near last or in the bottom half of the class for the exam would be demotivated. They wouldn't like it. So I think that competition can demotivate people if you're weaker students, or maybe a younger member of staff if we're talking about work. So competition has its limitations because it can demotivate people. And that is essentially my plan. So we've got view 1 here, view 2 here, and my opinion here. Now what I've got to do, of course, is to turn this into a complete essay, which I'll do over here. You will also notice, I hope, that in my plan, I've got some vocabulary which may be quite useful when I start to write my essay. So phrases like improve local community, problem solving, innovation, perspectives, quantified, outcomes, or weaker students. This is the kind of language that examiners are looking for. They're looking for precise and clear vocabulary. And a lot of that is already in my plan. So one of the things that planning your essay does, it helps you to generate vocabulary that you can use in your essay. That again is another great reason why you have to plan your essay if you want to get a high band score. So let's start to write the essay. The next thing we need to do is to write the introduction. When you introduce your essay, you're going to do two different things. Firstly, you're going to introduce your reader, the IELTS examiner, to the task. And the second thing, you're going to introduce your reader to your response. The easiest way of introducing your reader to the task is simply by writing the task in your own words. So you could write something like, many people believe that competition is, I wouldn't use the phrase a good thing, but you could simply say it's good, while other people think, because we've used the word, trying to avoid using believe again, other people think that cooperation is preferable. One thing you'll notice here, I hope, is that I've got the word cooperation in my essay, whereas in the task it's cooperate. So I've been able to change the word form from cooperate to cooperation. And that's an example of being able to use language in a flexible way. And this would be perfectly okay as a first sentence in a Band 7 essay. However, what I'm going to do is, I'll just delete this, is write what I would think would be more like a Band 8 or a Band 9 opening sentence. And I'm going to talk about the topic in a more general way. So when people discuss, or perhaps debate, how to achieve, because it's really about, I think it's all about how to achieve excellence, isn't it? The whole topic, really. How do you achieve excellence or success? Is it competition or cooperation? So when people discuss how to achieve excellence, they often debate the merits. It's a word that's similar in meaning to benefits. The merits of competition and cooperation. In fact, they often compare these things, don't they? They often compare the merits of competition and cooperation. So that is a much more flexible way of writing an opening sentence. Flexibility in language is something that IELTS examiners like to see if they're going to give you a Band 8 or a Band 9 essay for lexical resource and for grammatical range and accuracy. You can see the structure of this, and the vocabulary is a lot different to the task. So you can say something like, yes, many people believe that competition is good, while others believe that cooperation is better. But that's basically using the same structure as the task. This uses a completely different structure. And now I'm going to introduce my reader to my response. In a discuss both views essay, I would simply write a sentence that begins with this essay, because there's not really anything else you can do with a discuss both views essay. You're simply going to explain what your essay is going to do. So this essay will examine both views before presenting my own opinion, my own view, my own position. And that is all you need to write for the introduction. Keep it simple. 2 sentences is almost always enough for the introduction to an IELTS essay. I could go into more detail, I could explain my position here, but it's going to really be a bit of a waste of time. I need to get into the body of my essay and start to discuss those 2 particular views. So let's look at the first view, that competition is a good thing. So I could start by saying, on the one hand, that's a perfectly good way of starting to discuss the first view. I'm going to do it slightly differently. One commonly, I think there's a hyphen there. Might be wrong. One commonly held view is that competition is the best way to bring about. I've just realised I've used the word excellence in the introduction as well, and it's a good idea to try to avoid repeating too many words. I think I'll just, while I'm writing this, I will just change the language here so I'm not repeating the word excellence. One commonly held view is that competition is the best way to excel. And let's expand this particular idea because by encouraging people to aim to be better than everyone else, outcomes will be improved. And then I need to go into my examples here, which again I've got down in my plan, so I don't need to think about these particular ideas. For example, competition in sales. Competition in sales departments may lead to sales representatives to be more. Competition in sales departments may lead to sales representatives being, actually that is grammatically correct, may lead to sales representatives being more effective. And then my second view is to do with school. While in schools, pushing or encouraging, pushing. I've used the word encourage before, I think, yeah, so I'll use a different word here. Pushing students to get to the top of the class in examinations may stimulate them to study harder. And that's it. So I basically covered all of my ideas here in my plan. One commonly held view is that competition is the best way to excel because by encouraging people to aim to be better than everyone else, outcomes will be improved. For example, competition in sales departments may lead to sales representatives being more effective, while in schools, pushing students to get to the top of the class in examinations may stimulate them to study harder. Get is okay, but I might try to use a more precise word because we are writing an academic essay. So let's use a single word here, to reach the top of the class. That's probably a more precise word than get to. Now we need to go down. Hopefully you know what the task is by now. Go down to view 2, which is cooperation is better. Had I started my first body paragraph with on the one hand, then I would now write on the other hand, but I didn't. I'm going to use what I think is a slightly more natural way of introducing an alternative viewpoint. However, so this is a very useful contrasting word. So, however, an alternative view is that cooperation is better than the competition, or perhaps is preferable to competition because it leads to people that have got sharing ideas, working together. Leads to people sharing ideas and working together for the common good. That's quite a nice, useful phrase, a natural sounding phrase, which will impress the IELTS examiners. Also very precise. Now, my examples I've got here. For example, or alternatively, instead of using for example, which is kind of very overused, a good example of this in daily life might be local people, local residents working together to improve their community, their local community. But I've already used the word local there. Local residents working together to improve their community. Perhaps, so I'm getting into even more detail now, perhaps by clearing litter or volunteering to help other local people, to help people in need. So that's my example of daily life. And my other example is to do with work. So I could say something like in business. And I'm going to use a different word here. Collaboration has a very similar word, similar meaning to cooperation. Collaboration. So collaboration can lead, or often lead, some hedging here, can often lead to, what have I got here? Innovation and problem solving, or more effective problem solving. And why is that? Well, because of the different skills and perspectives, because of the different skills and held by the group. And I've also mentioned marketing as an even more specific example. I think I probably won't go into that. I think that's enough. I don't need to go into any more detail here because I now need to go into my own opinion. So that's the second view explained. So I've turned all of this into some complete sentences. However, an alternative view is that cooperation is preferable to competition because it leads to people sharing ideas and working together for the common good. A good example of this, an example of this in daily life might be local residents working together to improve their community, perhaps by clearing litter or volunteering to help people in need in business collaboration can often lead to innovation and more effective problem solving because of the different skills and perspectives held by the group. And now let's go into my own particular opinion, which in my plan was here, broadly cooperation best. Okay, let's put some extra spaces in here. So I could say in my opinion, but I'm just going to say I. There's nothing wrong with using the word I in your essay if you're talking about yourself. I generally agree that in most contexts, cooperation leads to better outcomes, better results, and also a greater sense of, I'm thinking about the community in the sense of well-being. If you make your community better, then there's a greater sense of well-being. So that makes it slightly different to what I said in the previous paragraphs. I think I might start by mentioning that competition is limited. So let's use this word moreover. Competition can actually demotivate those who are not near the top. For instance, to get into more detail again, weaker or average students may give up, may resign to this is a nice word, may resign themselves to mediocrity. That means being mediocre, the average. May resign themselves to mediocrity if they lose all hope of reaching or competing for the top places in a class. And the same may apply to people in the workplace. So I'm here explaining one of the key limitations of the idea that competition is good. I'm basically saying why I think that idea is not a particularly strong one. I'm pointing out the weaknesses in that particular view. So I think if you want to side with one particular view in a discuss both views essay, it's often good simply to point out the weaknesses in the view that you disagree with. Well, I conclude here. So for many people, is not better. And I've also got this thing how competition might be better if outcomes quantified. So I'll continue this paragraph. However, competition may be effective in certain situations, context, same word, basically, same meaning, especially when outcomes can be quantified, such as to do with sales results, I think is the one I'm going to use, such as with sales results. And actually, while I've been writing, another idea popped into my head. And it's that competition, I put it down in the plan, with yourself can be good. So it leads you to make small improvements. So if you are trying to compete with yourself, maybe you go to the gym. Yesterday you could lift 10 kilograms. Today you're trying to lift 11 kilograms. You're trying to compete with yourself as you were yesterday. So this is another idea I could put in, just that came to my head as I started to write it. So in addition, when people in effect are asked to compete with themselves by making small improvements. There's this nice little word as well, incremental. That incremental basically means step by step, small increments, very small improvements. So small, comma, I think I should have there as well, incremental improvements. Then this can be a powerful way to build skills and habits. Something like that. I could say such as going to the gym, but I think that's enough. So I've essentially finished my essay. I've got my introduction, the first view, the second view. I've got my own view here as well. You can write a very brief concluding paragraph which summarizes these 3 different positions. But to be honest, I don't think that's necessary in a discuss both views essay, because your opinion, because it builds on the discussion of the 2 views, is effectively your conclusion as well. So you don't need to do an extra conclusion. There's nothing really wrong with it. The only risk there is in having a concluding paragraph here is that you can just simply repeat yourself. But let's just do one anyway. In conclusion, while some people feel that is better, it encourages people to succeed. Others believe that cooperation, that because cooperation encourages, I've used the word encourages far too much in this essay. Others believe that because cooperation stimulates working together, it leads to better outcomes. I generally agree with this second view, but with certain caveats which I explained in this particular paragraph. Certain caveats, this sort of hedging, this idea that in certain circumstances competition can be a better thing, but broadly think that cooperation is a better idea. So there is my finished essay. It's actually there we go. So I've ended up writing a 5-paragraph essay: the introduction, discussion of the first view, discussion of the second view, discussion of my view, and a very brief conclusion. So let's look in more detail at some of the vocabulary that I used here in my essay. And also when I read through this, I can make some corrections too, because the last step when you write your essay is to check it for mistakes. You don't need to change any ideas at this stage. It's too late to do that. You don't need to rewrite any paragraphs because, again, it's usually too late to do that. But you can change some individual words if you can think of better ones. Let's see what we can do very quickly to maybe just improve this essay slightly more. So when people discuss how to achieve excellence, they often compare the merits of competition and cooperation. This essay will examine both views before presenting my own position. One commonly held view is that competition is the best way to excel because, by encouraging people to aim to be better than everyone else, outcomes will be improved. For example, competition in sales departments may lead to sales representatives being more effective, while in schools, pushing students to reach the top of the class in examinations may stimulate them to study harder. However, an alternative view is that cooperation is preferable to competition because it leads to people sharing ideas and working together for the common good. An example of this in daily life might be local residents working together to improve their community, perhaps by clearing litter or volunteering to help people in need. So clearing litter is a natural collocation. You might think it's cleaning litter, but if you clean litter, that means you pick up a piece of litter like a piece of paper or a crisp packet and polish it and clean it, wash it. But we talk about clearing litter or volunteering to help people in need. So again, that's a useful collocation here. In business, collaboration, so here I'm using a synonym of cooperation, can often lead to innovation, which is a very precise word, and more effective problem solving because of the different skills and perspectives held by the group. This phrase here, the different skills and perspectives held by the group, is an example of a complex noun phrase. If you can write structures like these, then it's going to impress the examiner, get you a higher band score for both lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy. This phrase here essentially is taking the place of a single noun. I generally agree, so this is how I introduced my position. In most contexts, cooperation leads to better outcomes and a greater sense of well-being. That's another very precise word. Moreover, now this conjunction means but more importantly. So, but more importantly, competition can actually demotivate those who are not near the top. This is another structure that is quite difficult to get right. Those who are not near the top. For instance, weaker or average students may resign themselves to mediocrity if they lose all hope of competing for the top places in a class. So I've got a conditional here as well. And the same apply, I think that actually should be applies to people in the workplace. So for many people, competition is not better. However, So for many people, competition is not better, although let's do some referencing here. It may be effective in certain situations, especially when outcomes can be quantified, such as with sales results. In addition, so another transition signal, when people in effect are asked to compete by themselves, let's get rid of this. Let's just simplify it. When people compete with themselves by making small incremental improvements, this can be a powerful way to build skills and habits. Again, some precise vocabulary here and another conditional here. In conclusion, transition signal while some people, there's an introduction to a complex sentence, while some people feel that competition is better because it encourages people to succeed, others believe that because cooperation stimulates working together, it leads to better overall outcomes. I generally agree with this second view, but with certain caveats. And that I've just done a word count is 321 words. Let's just go back to the second paragraph because I didn't look at some of the vocabulary here. One commonly held view. Again, the word excel is a nice precise word. By encouraging is a nice little phrase you can use. Competition in sales departments. I do worry about the repetition of sales here, but I think that's okay. Being more effective may lead to sales representatives as being more effective. While we've got a complex sentence as well, pushing students. I could have used the word encourage, but I've used it here already. Stimulate is an alternative word to encourage or pushing. So that's an example of a high-scoring IELTS essay in response to a discuss both views question. So I hope you found that useful. I've pasted a copy of the essay into the description below the video. And if you have any questions or comments about the essay, about the things I did, then please put them into the comments. So thank you very much for watching.